Hello, Vermont. I'm Andy Julow.
And I'm Joanna Grossman.
And this is There's No A in Creamy.
Vermont politics, culture, and beyond.
Thanks for joining us.
Hey, folks. Welcome back to There's No A in Creamy. We are recording episode 4 today. Very exciting. So we hope you guys got a chance to listen to our last episode interviewing Attorney General Charity Clark.
Yes.
That was amazing.
It was a great interview.
She lives up to the hype.
She really does. Yeah.
She was just so fun. And I mean, I feel like she's amazing on multiple levels. She's an incredible attorney general, totally fighting for democracy, fighting for our state. And she was also just like really great to talk to and funny and just energetic.
Engaging, just a very dynamic person and just a lot of fun to chat with.
Yeah, she was great. So make sure to check that out. That was our last episode. And coming up, we have Senator Becca White, who is also really fun and engaging and amazing. And I'm super excited to talk to her, too.
Yes. She was my golfing partner at a fundraiser last fall.
During the campaign.
During the campaign. It was pouring rain. It was very cold. And it was still fun because Senator White is a lot of fun.
She's amazing. Yeah, we should put that golf cart picture on our socials.
Yeah, the brim of my hat, I don't know, how long did that drip? It retained so much moisture, but it just kept dripping. Oh, the campaign
hat, that's right.
Yes, it dripped for a long time.
Oh my God, I totally remember that because I'm just, as a campaign manager, I just always want to make sure the candidate is like, okay. And like you were like out in the pouring rain for this fundraiser for hours and you come back and literally soaked and like dripping. And I was like, oh my God, they broke my candidate.
And I'm not a golfer.
Right.
I had to go way back to the attic and get the golf clubs that I inherited when my grandfather died and pull those out. And I was like, I don't have to do this, right? And you're like, yeah, you do. It's
sorry.
It's a fundraiser.
For those who don't know, this entire podcast is an opportunity for Andy to retaliate against me for all the stuff I made him do during the campaign.
Yeah, it's well deserved.
Yeah, for sure. And then I made you do doors after.
You did. Yes, you did. You didn't even give me. I thought I was going to get the afternoon off. You're just like, just wring your hat out and go out there and knock on some doors.
I am really mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good times. Good times.
Get elected and then you can have pneumonia.
So, do you want to tell us a little about, have you heard any roosters lately, Andy? Anything like that?
Well, when we do also have Howard Dean on the horizon, right?
Oh, yes, of course. Yes. So we have, Becca White is coming up and Howard Dean is going to be coming up too. Yeah. And we actually have a few other exciting guests already lining up in the queue and we're thrilled to have them here.
Yeah. We've been teasing that one for a while, so I just want to...
Yes.
It's coming.
Howard Dean is coming. Yes.
Absolutely.
We're very excited.
Yeah, your rooster question.
Well, it's funny because part of the shtick of this podcast, right, is that like I live in the city and you live in the country and I'm the one with a rooster.
Yes.
And every time we're on the phone or leaving voice memos or something, my rooster is like crowing in the background like he cannot stop.
You sound like you're calling from Green Acres.
Yeah, for real. Yeah, for real. But you've gotten closer to the roosters lately.
Yes. Well, I got a new piece of backpacking equipment, which is it's an underquilt, which I don't think you'd heard of before.
Yeah, I don't know what that means.
Every time, So our conversations are abrupt these days. We start talking and we say, wait a minute, save that for the podcast.
Oh, yeah, save it for the podcast is like a big thing.
So if you backpack, you can be a ground dweller and you can sleep in a tent or you can sleep under a tarp or you can swing from a hammock. And my wife and I have decided we like hammock camping. And
that sounds fun.
It is. But so when you sleep in a sleeping bag, the actual warmth is coming from the loft of the feathers inside your sleeping bag. Right. And when you lie on top of them, you crush them and there's no air to actually keep you warm.
So you're getting like conduction from the ground and freezing?
It's just like having your bare back to the
I've had that experience, actually. I have camped.
Okay, well, you need an underquilt. Well, okay.
I probably
do. If you're
do.
a ground dweller, you use a sleeping pad, and it has to have some R value, and that keeps your back warm.
Gotcha.
If you're in a hammock, you can bring in a pad, but it's uncomfortable. So what you get is an underquilt, which is a bottom half of your sleeping bag that goes underneath your hammock, and then instead of a sleeping bag, you get a top quilt. And that goes on top of you. So you get an underquilt and a top quilt, and basically together, they're a sleeping bag.
Nice. Smart. It's like insulation.
Oh, it's great. But anytime I get a new piece of equipment, I have this journal and I go outside and different temperatures. And if I wake up cold, I hit my watch and I check how cold it is.
Wow.
I write it down, say, okay, I got cold at this temperature and if I got too hot. So I have different setups and different underquilts and different liners and all that stuff. And I try to figure out exactly the equipment, dial it all in. So if I'm going on a camping trip and I know the range of temperatures, I bring the right equipment and I'm not bringing things that I don't need.
So you're sacrificing your not camping sleeping to preserve your camping sleeping.
Yeah. I didn't think about it like that.
No, it makes sense because
Yeah.
you have options when you're not camping, but not when you are camping.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there's a villain in this story.
The rooster.
The rooster.
Yeah.
There's a rooster across, I live on a canal off the lake, and across the canal there's a rooster
Yeah.
who, for some reason, is crowing at 2:45 one night and then 3:17, like going nuts.
Yeah.
And so I texted you.
Not at that time, though.
No.
I don't think so. I don't know my notifications.
I waited till a reasonable hour, and I texted you, and I said, does your rooster crow in the middle of the night? And for some reason, you thought that was a strange question. A line of questioning ensued.
Yeah.
And I told you I had a new piece of equipment, and
Yeah.
I was sleeping outside, and you thought it was like a new microphone
Yeah.
that I was testing outside at night.
I just didn't understand. Yeah, it didn't occur to me that equipment would include like camping equipment. I think I was thinking like of something that plugs in. I don't know. It just didn't really track. But I can say for sure that it wasn't my rooster because he's not that loud.
Yeah. And you sympathized with the rooster, or
Yeah.
you kind of sided with this rooster.
I love my little rooster.
Yeah.
He's so
I like your
sweet.
rooster too.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this is not that rooster. This is a different rooster.
You have a bad rooster.
You don't know
One
this
of the
rooster.
Vermont
He could be a
breweries has a one of the breweries, what's the brewery in Richmond? Stone Corral, I think. They have a beer called Bad Rooster.
Bad rooster.
I'm really wishing I'd brought it to you.
So I think what they do, though, is if a predator comes around, they do crow
Maybe.
to warn. And if they hear a rooster in the vicinity, they will crow back. They'll crow back to that rooster. So there are actually multiple roosters around the neighborhood.
Yeah.
There's a whole gang of them. They could all be jerks.
Yeah, they
could
might
just
all be.
Yeah. They could just be drinking Red Bull, listening to Nickelback. Like we're just gonna crow it up at 3:17 a.m.
Oh, we're always like our rooster, sometimes it's like he's on a repeat. Like he just will not stop. And I always say to Steve, I'm like, what is he saying? Like, what is he trying to tell us? You know, I just want to go out there and be like, dude, we heard you.
Do you go out there and do that?
I mean, I wouldn't know, but
Yeah.
like once in a while I'll go out there and be like, Chuck, his name is Chuck. And I'll be like, he's so cool. He's just sweet.
He's a cool rooster.
Thank you.
He's not a jerk.
He's not a jerk. But I'll like go out there and be like, Chuck, like, what's going on? Are you all right, buddy? You know, and he just like, he's so cute. And he'll like, sometimes he'll crow when we're out there. Sometimes he won't. We'll go back and he just starts up again. Like he just needs to get it out of his system. So I'm sorry about your bad rooster experience.
Thank
though.
you.
Yeah.
I appreciate your disingenuous sympathy.
No, I'm genuous. I'm genuine.
All right, back to the podcast.
Sure. Okay. So we have launched, and along those lines, this is episode 4 now, as we've said, we want to thank my nephew, Ryan Ronzoni, for the extraordinary music that he has composed and produced for us for the podcast. It is beautiful and amazing. And Ryan, you're just incredibly talented, and we appreciate you so much. Thank you for doing that.
We want to thank everyone for subscribing. The response has been great. Sending us notes, ratings and reviews, particularly important. It works those algorithms. It moves our podcast to the suggestions for people on Apple Podcast and Spotify. So that's super important. If you're enjoying us, please let us know by rating it or reviewing it.
Yeah, we really appreciate those. Thanks, everyone. And definitely, if you're listening, please do rate and review it. So along the lines of launching, we got a little footage of you and I popping some champagne right by my rooster in my backyard.
By Chuck.
Yep.
But
yeah, so we had a little, our families got together to have a little like launch party, and we had the champers, and then we had some oysters. Steve and I, we love oysters, but I will say I've only been eating oysters for a year. So, I was a vegetarian for most of my life until a year ago. And we were like, let's get together and have some oysters. And we did that. And it was interesting because I had taken for granted that not coming from a landlocked state, I have had, been around oysters and knew what they were. And you had not had them before.
I have never had oysters before. I thought that I had, but we got to the bottom of that, and I'd actually had mussels.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which were different.
Apparently.
And
I'm learning.
I was nervous for you to have the oysters experience because it sounds really bougie and elitist and insufferable. And so that was part of it. And that maybe I fall into those buckets already. I'm not really sure. I don't want to know.
We have a podcast that makes us insufferable by definition, I think.
Spot on. That's right. Okay, so one of the little things that we wanted to introduce is a new mini segment that's a glossary, because we use some words that we're used to using in the political world, and the podcast isn't accessible if Andy and I are sitting here talking in code. So we want to make sure that we're explaining some of the words, and I have a couple words that I want us to discuss and explain. A few episodes ago, we talked about unicameral. You want to explain that one, Andy? I will if you don't.
Sure.
Yeah.
You didn't give me any warning. You don't know that I know what unicameral is.
Oh,
but
maybe you don't.
I
that
do.
would be funny.
So, we have a bicameral legislature. We have a Senate and a House of Representatives.
Right. Two chambers.
As it turns out, Nebraska is our only unicameral legislative state.
Right.
And they just have one chamber.
Right.
So there's no Senate, there's no House. There's just the one body.
The one. So, So unicameral is, instead of having two chambers, there's one.
Okay. What's next on the quiz?
Okay. Next. Oh, okay. Cool. I didn't know we're structuring it like that, but now I'm down.
Well, we don't have to.
We're gonna hit that pretty hard in last licks. So, yeah. So
Foreshadowing.
Oh, it's gonna be fun, guys. Stay till the end.
Oh, God.
So caucuses. Okay. The word caucus is super problematic because it actually means a million different things. But I'm going to explain to you how we use it and how it's often used in the party. So the way we use it generally is the Democratic caucuses are the Democrats that make up the House and then the Democrats that make up the Senate. So when I say the caucuses, I mean the House Democrats and the Senate Democrats. This won't help, but as the Chittenden County chair, I do sometimes say the Chittenden County caucus, which refers to all the Democrats of both chambers that are in Chittenden County. And I don't think I'll use that as much on the podcast. There are, just to confuse you, there are other caucuses. There's the rural caucus, which is an actual, official caucus of the legislature, which is bipartisan, and people meet and discuss issues. You could probably talk a lot more about that than me, Andy. And, there is also in the party, there's the disability caucus, there's groups in the party that discuss things. So that word is totally overused. But when we say the caucuses, we're talking about the Dems in the House and the Senate. Is that what do you think?
Yeah, that sounds as well as you can explain it. You're right. It is a loaded word with lots of meanings.
Okay. ADU, Andy, what's an ADU?
That is an accessory dwelling unit, so that is usually a smaller unit built on your lot. That is usually just a mother-in-law style apartment.
Yeah, and I can say in Burlington, that's been a growing thing to increase housing density in Burlington, that they've been kind of recently, just in the last few years, allowed people to build ADUs, and so they can build little apartments in their yard.
Yeah, there's a lot of incentives out there and a lot of looser restrictions to allow that in zoning. It hasn't been taken up as much as I think that people would have hoped.
Yeah. Folks, I'm super excited about our Hot Toppings segment today. We're going to be doing a little part 2 on education finance. I'm going to be talking about the housing policy as well, the housing bill. There's a lot going on in the legislature, even right now, right up to the end of the session. And Andy's going to walk us through some of it. I actually wanted to share with you guys a little backstory. As some of you know, I'm a serial campaign manager here in Vermont. And one of the interesting things about being a campaign manager is that you meet a like bushy-tailed new candidate who comes to you and, they know everything about policy and super in the weeds on like all this different, issues. And to them, that is what it takes to win. And I love them for that. But of course, that's not how it works. And, I'm like, yes, it's awesome that you know everything about that policy. And now we're going to boil that down to 3 words and stick it on a mailer. And that's how you win. And so Andy and I bring different skill sets into the room. And I feel very lucky that he knows a ton about all these different policy issues that we're talking about this season. And yeah, so he's going to take us through a couple of these issues that he happens to have a lot of subject matter expertise on. And then when we get back to the hardball politics, that'll be when I come into the analysis.
There we go. Thank you for that introduction.
Yeah.
I am so glad that this knowledge is finally coming in handy.
Yeah.
Just had to start a podcast.
Yeah.
Let's talk about education, finance to begin with. And in episode 2, we walked through everything from 1997 till about 2 weeks ago. So when we last left this bill, it was coming out of the Senate Finance Committee, and everybody wasn't happy with it. Even the Senate Finance Committee, there just was very little enthusiasm about the product.
It's been brutal.
It has, and that, of course, carried into the Senate floor, and it just became clear that the Democrats did not have enough support to push that bill through. And they had a caucus late one afternoon. It was very open, very frank, and there were just a lot of concerns expressed about that bill. And it was clear there wasn't enough consensus to bring it forward with Democratic support.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so they made the difficult decision to essentially scrap what they had been working on, what had come through the Senate Ed Committee and through Senate Finance, and go back to something that was closer to the House version. So on May 22nd, the Democratic senators buckled down, tried to construct an amendment to roll it back to a lot of what was in the House, but maybe pick out a few things that were important to them and make those changes. And on May 22nd, the Senate stayed late. 6 p.m., they announced they did not yet have that amendment. 7 p.m., they again announced it wasn't quite ready. 8 o'clock, and I kept getting pings on my phone. They're going live. And,
Yeah.
So at 8:04, 6, something like that, I got a ping, and so I tuned in, and somebody forgot to turn the sound on. So,
Oh, no.
yeah. So on YouTube, there was just motion. It's not the clearest picture.
No, it's not.
No, and there are other feeds out there that have much better cameras than the actual official one.
Well, you always know, like now and then when Vermont Public or whatever is covering it, and then you're like, oh, that's like a nice shot. And then you have to go back to the ordinary, like camera that's in the chamber, and you're like, oh, it's like grainy, and what's happening. Yeah.
I don't know where they're finding that camera, because it's like everybody's phone has like 10 times the resolution of that camera.
Yeah.
But anyway.
It's a doozy.
Yeah. So it was, anyway, they all got up, they filed out, and I texted one of my people in the room, and they said, there was basically no consensus. We're leaving. So they stayed until after 8 and came away with nothing that day. There were 2 senators, Democratic senators, that were not going to go along with it. And that was the end of the game for that day in the Senate. They could not bring forth that resolution or that amendment. Next day, May 23rd, they come back, and in the afternoon they have a break because Senator Scott Beck, a Republican, the minority leader, announces he's willing to vote for the amendment in exchange for being on the conference committee. And that tips the balance. That amendment passes, and it goes through the Senate. Wow. It's pretty similar to the House version, but it does loosen the restrictions, the Senate version, on independent schools. Rather than 51% of students needing to be from public tuition for independent schools, they lower it to 25%. They lower class size minimums.
That's a big one.
That's a big one. That just really limits the amount of schools that might be pressured to close.
Yeah, particularly in rural districts.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. They come up with a different composition of the task force, move away from the House bill was very heavily tilted towards education groups like the Superintendent's Association and the School Boards Association.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
I got an email from my superintendent about it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
I think I got one from your superintendent as well. And it switches, instead of picking a number to actually base the formula on, it just says, let's do a study. So they're very similar to the House, except those 4 changes, which are pretty key. And so when they sit down to conference committee, they've got to work out those 4, and it's too much. The conference committee came away with no agreement, and we do not yet have an ed bill. We did get a joint statement from the governor, from the speaker, and from the pro tem on Friday saying, we knew this wouldn't be easy. We're going to figure it out, and we're going to keep trying.
Wow. I mean, this was the issue
Yeah.
of not just of the session, like since Election Day, since way before Election Day. And it is staggering that they still don't have agreement.
Yeah, I mean, as we were going around for doors all fall, I mean, what's on your
Absolutely.
mind? We knew this was the number one thing that people mentioned.
Oh, it was clear. It was crystal clear.
Yeah. What we're starting to see is attempt here is to move everything to the middle and really come up with a standard formula that controls costs from Montpelier. And rather than having this local control, it really does just standardize the experience across the state. What that means, though, is that towns and communities that have chosen to pay a little bit more to bring their kids a little bit more quality or some more programs in their school are going to have to roll those back.
Yeah.
Communities that have said, we'll forego that, we'll try to save a little bit on our tax rate, are going to see an increase in their tax rate.
Yeah.
And it sort of lines up Republican-Democrat. The Democrats are the former, and the Democratic communities are seeing maybe the quality of their schools rolled back, and the Republican communities are facing a potential tax increase. That doesn't make anybody happy.
No, everybody's unhappy.
Yep.
That's right.
So, well, I guess the saga continues, and we'll pick it up in a future episode.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, it's been full contact sport.
We have better news on housing.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. So let's go back to the beginning of the session on this one, because we haven't covered this yet. There were housing bills. And so you always hear housing bills instead of a housing bill.
Right.
Right. There were 2. There was one on the Senate side and there's one on the House side, S127, H479. They're what's called companion bills. And you see this a lot in housing and areas where there's just going to be a lot of change. And what happens here is that there's coordination between the House and the Senate to find out where the common areas are. They write up 2 separate bills, one on each side, that are as similar as they can be based on their preliminary discussions. And this way, the standard track for a bill is to start in one chamber, work its way through before crossover, which is the midpoint of the session.
Crossover, for folks who, going to the glossary section for a second, crossover is when bills from the House move to the Senate for review and bills from the Senate move to the House for review. Andy could probably give a more technical definition, but that's my take.
That's a good short definition. And if a bill doesn't make it by the deadline, then it is dead.
Right.
But it's like the English language. There's a million exceptions. But
Right.
following the standard track, that's what's supposed to happen. But in that case, if you did that with a housing bill, that would mean the Senate Housing Committee would work on it for half the session and then pass it over to the House Committee. And each one would only be working on it for half. So by swapping bills and keeping them in sync as much as possible throughout the session and coordinating their efforts, they're both able to fully attend to those for the entire session. That's the goal of having these companion bills.
Yep.
But they do tend to agree that at the very beginning that one of these is going to ultimately carry through and the other is going to go to the garbage pail. And Mark Mahaly from the Housing General Committee said that very early on that he and Senator Clarkson had an agreement that S127 would be the ultimate vehicle and H479 would be a dead end.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. There's a lot in both of these bills for all the existing housing programs and some changes to statute. But the program that really drew a lot of people's attention this year was called CHIP. It was the effort in that housing bill to try to boost the housing stock. A lot of effort in previous sessions has gone towards modernizing Act 250. We got that last session with Act 181. Now we're looking at a program to try to tip the scale and incentivize more housing development. And CHIP was the program that was come up with by the Senate Economic Development Committee.
And CHIP stands for?
Community Housing and Infrastructure Program.
Thank you.
Yes. It is a mini TIF, tax increment financing.
Right.
We have TIFs. They are generally, larger. They're a little bit more. They have an administrative burden, so they are generally, just executed by larger communities. What they allow you to do is to take out a bond and to build infrastructure. It could be streetscape, it could be utilities, water, wastewater, and then whatever gets built in those parcels from the result of that infrastructure, you get to keep the tax revenue that is generated until you pay down the bond.
Mm-hmm.
It allows you to take an area that is not growing naturally, and you are supposed to make a case here to a board that growth is not going to happen unless there's a public investment. You make that public investment, and then you take that growth and you pay back your bond. Opponents, of course, point out that it's really hard to say what would or would not have occurred in the future.
Right.
And if you build this infrastructure and a building gets built that wouldn't have been built, then there's all this tax revenue that's generated.
Yeah.
And once you paid off that bond, the state keeps that indefinitely. On the other hand, if that building would have been built anyway, then you're losing revenue from the ed fund.
Right.
So it's a little controversial in its concept. But the idea of taking that concept and making it smaller in a mini TIF is what it's been called throughout the years, has been around for a while and is proposed year after year, and year after year it goes nowhere.
Oh, so this is not a new concept in the Vermont legislature?
No, not at all. And this is something the administration has tried numerous times. And they tried this year. They came up with a program called Spark, which was a mini TIF.
Oh, I like that name.
It's a nice name. And Let's Build Homes came up with their own version called HIT, which sounded a little aggressive.
Yeah.
And so the Senate Economic Development Committee looked at both of those, came up with this chip, which was specifically tuned to housing. So let's shrink it down. Let's make it parcel-based so it's not big. Let's make it easier to administer. And let's make sure that it's building housing.
Well, what I think is so great about the CHIP program is that TIFs, my read on TIFs is that they're generally more for urban areas, and urban areas have benefited from that. And, it's facilitated growth, like in my town in Burlington, for sure. And this is an opportunity for rural areas and rural districts to gain some of the same benefits. And they've been sort of left behind. And that, to me, seems like the right thing to do at this moment.
Yeah, and just an example of how this might be used. If a small rural area has a water system, but they've got a road that water system doesn't go down, they could use this program to extend the water down a road.
Nice.
And whatever gets built, they can use that revenue to pay off that water pipe. And that way their taxpayers are not liable for paying off that water pipe.
Yeah.
And that housing gets built.
Yeah, it just takes out some of those barriers that, people may not even realize are there.
Yeah, and the economics of building homes right now just isn't working on its own.
Yeah.
And this is a way to tip the scales a little bit and make it more profitable for developers to come in. And again, this is not building the houses. The developers have to still build the houses. This is just laying the pipe, laying the water, creating the streets, creating the sidewalks, so the developers don't have to bear that cost as well.
Gotcha.
So this is the journey. It starts in Senate Economic Development. They lay out that 80% of whatever revenue you generate from this project, so whatever gets built, 80% of that the municipality gets to keep to pay off their bond for up to 20 years or until they've paid off the bond. They don't put any criteria on whether that housing has to be affordable. Mm-hmm. They actually don't even create a minimum on whether there has to be a certain percentage of housing created. So if you put a water pipe down, you might get a storefront, you might get some industry.
Yeah.
You might get a community building. Hopefully you're going to get housing. That's the main goal. They don't actually place any minimum on housing developments.
That is very interesting.
They allow for building in all Tier 1A, Tier 1B, and 2 areas. And these are these temporary areas that were created by Act 181. That is essentially downtowns, villages, this areas surrounding villages, and everything else that isn't a river or a mountain or a protected natural resource. So it's pretty broad. You can pretty much use it everywhere.
Gotcha.
I could have just said that.
No, I like how you did it.
Okay.
Yeah.
There is no but-for criteria, and most TIFs have this thing called a but-for criteria that say a board has to look at this, you need to make a case, and that board needs to determine that but for public investment, this project would not happen or would have happened in a substantially different nature.
Right. This has been the but. You keep hearing about the but for.
Yeah.
And it's it's good we're unpacking
It's a
that
big
a tiny
but-for.
bit. Yeah, it's big.
It's essentially this addresses the critics' concerns of, like, if this would have been built anyway, then why would we let them forego money from the ed fund back to the bond if it would have been built on its own? And the but-for is designed to make that determination that it would not have happened without the public investment.
Well, that's the power tussle back and forth, right? It's because, okay, is it okay to take money out of the ed fund for this versus, like, we're trying to remove regulations so that people can build stuff.
Yeah.
So that's the tension there. And
right. And people who believe in TIF would never say you're taking money out of the ed fund because it's never there to begin with without the investment.
Right.
Yeah.
It's literally the opportunity cost.
The bill then goes out to Senate Finance. It goes to Senate Appropriations. It goes through the Senate floor. It really doesn't change significantly through any of those committees from where it was out of Senate Economic Development. Then it goes to the House.
Yeah.
It goes through House General, and there are some changes here to make sure that there are housing units built. Remember, we said they didn't really guarantee that there would be housing.
Right.
House General says that whatever is built and you're counting your increments towards your tax or your bond payments, 40% of that floor space should be housing. Or if you have some kind of special case, then bring it forward and we'll consider it on a waiver basis.
Gotcha.
They also want some affordable housing guarantee. So they say you can keep 80% of the education taxes you generate if 20% of the housing units you generate are affordable. Otherwise, you can only keep 70% of what you generate.
Oh, wow. So there's like a little punishment if not enough of the housing is affordable.
Yeah, it's a soft minimum. It doesn't say you have to have this, but it does say you're going to get less revenue if you don't meet a minimum affordable housing standard.
It's like a little bit of an incentive. Got it.
Yep. It also goes through House Commerce after that, still largely the way that it was coming out of House General. Then it goes to House Ways and Means, and this is where the drama starts.
Yeah.
House Ways and Means makes some pretty significant changes. So they take that 40% floor space and for housing, and they increase it to 65% of the floor space must be housing.
Gotcha.
The previous process that the House Commerce and House General approved said you can also apply for a waiver if you have some special circumstance. They remove that path. So straight up, 65% of the development that happens as a result of your infrastructure has to be housing.
Gotcha.
Now remember, you're not actually building the housing, you're just putting in the infrastructure, so you don't have solid control of what pops up.
Yeah.
As a community, right?
You really don't. That's right. Wow.
So this makes a lot of people nervous.
Yeah.
They add a cap to the amount of mini TIF districts that can be approved at any one time. It's a $40 million cap. They add the but-for. So now that's it.
My favorite thing of the legislative session.
They remove Tier 2 from eligibility until 2028, and this is one of the real areas of concern. Tier 2 is rural. Anything outside of a village or its buffer or a downtown or its buffer would not be eligible for this program until 2028. They also removed several of the eligible expenses, including utilities. And when this amendment comes out from Ways and Means, all heck breaks loose.
I would think so, yeah.
Yeah, the governor condemns it. The chambers of commerce condemn it. Regional development corporations express their concern. Housing groups, a lot of other committees.
Yeah, there were a lot of like action alert type emails going around.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The emails were flowing. And you were in the State House, and we covered this in episode 3 that
Right.
like there's a tingle in the air, something is going on.
That was everyone was just kind of like gathering and getting ready to go to the house floor. And I've finally pieced together what was going on. But it was, there was a vibe.
And we got this caucus of the whole, which was the entire house, with Charlie Kimball from Ways and Means saying, look, this is what we did, and this is why we did it, and taking questions. And he did a really, really good job of explaining it.
To take that like level of Q&A on the floor, that must have been intense.
At this point, I mean, it's just the Senate picks up H479. Remember that one? The one that was supposed to go to the trash bin.
Right.
Dusts off that zombie, passes it, and which it was never intended to do. And so it has now passed the House and the Senate as if to say, like, if you can't figure this out, we have to get a housing bill through. And we just put through H479. The Rural Caucus comes out with their own amendments, which peel it back to similar to how it was when it left the Senate. That fails. Several people, including members of Ways and Means, House Commerce, and House General, get together and come up with their own amendment. And their amendment allows for Tier 2, so it opens up those rural areas again. It keeps the cap, but it allows a little flexibility. There was a lot of concern that the cap was set too low. It does not change the but-for. It does not change the floor space requirements, and it doesn't roll back the affordability requirements. But it does get past the House in that form.
Wow.
It goes to conference committee.
That is high drama right there.
It is. And then in conference committee, obviously those are two very different bills. That chip left the Senate with almost no restrictions on it, and it's picked up a lot in the House. And so they have got to work out an agreement. And what they do, the agreement that they come up with, is they are actually going to allow communities to keep 85% of the ed fund. So higher than it's ever been.
Yeah.
But they do need to have at least 15% affordable housing or 25% moderate housing.
Gotcha.
And if they don't meet that, they can keep 75% of the ed increment. They increase that cap from 40 million to 200 million. So they create all kinds of additional capacity for approving projects.
Nice.
They change the floor space requirement from 65% to 60%. So still high, but put back the ability to apply for a waiver in special cases.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And they create exemptions from the but-for affordable housing, but they keep the but-for all others.
Interesting.
That's the grand compromise that we have.
Wow. It's extraordinary. What a journey.
It really was. Yep.
I mean, one thing that like during this whole journey that's really stuck with me is that rural voters just made it really clear that they felt left behind. And I feel like one of the things we could really do is make sure that we're giving them the benefits that we're giving urban voters, or like, you know, Vermont's version of urban voters. And this is a really good opportunity to do that.
Yeah, we'll see. It's supposed to be easy to administer. We'll see how that holds up for some of these smaller communities. One of the interesting things about it is unlike a TIF, it doesn't have to be publicly voted on. If a developer is going to foot the bill here, they can do that. And so these projects can happen without voter approval, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yes, that is interesting. Yeah, it really will be interesting to see like how the programs are leveraged and how it moves forward.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, and lots of funding for programs like VHIP, which rehabilitate apartment buildings that may be taken out of circulation, allow for ADUs, mobile home improvements, lots of funding for programs like that. Just a big bill with lots of housing, but CHIP kind of stole the show this year.
Yeah, it really did. Awesome. Thank you so much for walking me through that.
You're welcome. All right, that brings us to our last licks section where Joanna and I are mean to each other for a little while. I'm actually going to be nicer. I was, I feel like I was a little mean in the last one.
It's important that you all hear the end of episode 2 So you understand the latent resentment lingering from our campaigns together.
I think it's important to point out, though, that I did side with you on a
Right,
couple
right.
of things that were in the New York category.
That's true.
I didn't get any credit for that. I'm feeling underappreciated right now.
I appreciate you.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all I needed.
There. Excellent.
All right. So I'm going to be nicer this time, and I would like for you to use your outside perspective. You've lived here a long time. You live here by choice. You love Vermont.
Yep.
I found one of the most valuable things about living outside of the state is it really helps you appreciate some of the things that you don't always do when you're here and don't always appreciate. So I would love to get your outside perspective on things in the state that maybe we locals overlook and just don't quite appreciate or take for granted.
Yeah, I love that.
All right. I'm going to give you a few categories.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right. The first one is food markets.
Yeah, food markets. The food culture in Vermont is amazing. I think we already know that. But I'll drill down on that for a second. So, I mean, obviously food culture in New York City is also amazing, but it's totally different, right? It's like really focused on high-end restaurants and, like fancy vendors and things like that. And in Vermont, to answer your question, I mean, my favorite food market.
I answered the question.
So, I mean, there's just so much here, but I love the co-op. I love City Market so much. I was on the board for 8 years. I'm a huge fan. And the Burlington Farmers Market is also amazing. But there's so much to that. Like, if you go to the Burlington Farmers Market, this is like, if you go to the big Union Square Farmers Market in New York, which I used to go to every Saturday when I lived there, you meet like the kids who are paid to like man the booth, right? But like if you go to the Burlington Farmers Market, there's like a decent chance you met like the person who grew your strawberries or made your cheese. That to me is still amazing. Like that does not wear off. Like I've talked to so many extraordinary vendors there, and I've really loved that. We've gotten to know a few over the years. Adam from Adam's Berry Farm really stands out as a really extraordinary part of the food culture here. And and there's also like adjacent to the food markets and the food culture is the normalization here of herbal remedies and how readily available they are. Like that to me is really cool because it's like in New York, you could get like, for example, fire cider or elderberry syrup. I was just sick, so those are fresh in my mind. But it's like if you get them here, it's like someone made them. They like the elderberries like came from the tree in their yard, and they're like, "Oh, you're sick? I'm going to bring down some homemade fire cider or whatever."
The label's in Sharpie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like that's totally normal here, and it's like it's so wonderful because I don't know, like it's just like it's someone like loved your food and made it for you, and that's I don't know. It's a chicken soup for the soul situation.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, how about a cultural site?
Do you have
Well,
favorites?
I just the Shelburne Museum was like that was like our field trip spot, and like we're going to the museum, and like that's where you went as a kid. And when you leave Vermont, you're like, okay, where's the museum? And it's always that is an amazing place.
Yeah.
And they don't have it elsewhere. It's a very special resource, and I just developed a whole new level of appreciation for the Shelburne Museum when I lived in other places.
I mean, the Shelburne Museum there's so much to do, and especially like having had a kid here, it was always fun to go there, and like there was so much to see and explore, and they're always doing different stuff all the time. It's amazing. Yeah. Echo is also another I mean, man, we took Issa down there so many times when they were little, and that was always a blast. And I mean, all the I'm not a mastered hiker camper like you are, but all the like beautiful campsites and small hikes around the area that we've been to also kind of pop in my head.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about an activity for kids or families?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I hit that a little bit with the last one. I do really love Echo, but I mean, the bike path to us is like, it's been a huge part of our lives. We live really close to the bike path, and we're the Burlington bike path, and God, we were down there all the time. Issa and Steve walk on it almost every night. And it's just really extraordinary.
Yeah, the network of bike paths we have here is it's not common.
No, I mean, then the walk bike culture here is really cool. Mm-hmm. That's kind of just started to boom in New York after we left. And I commuted on my bike in the city for 10 years. And, you know, we were like, it was like us and the bike messengers, like weaving through the cabs, you know. But here it's just like, it's so lovely, and there's a lot to do. There's another thing, like we took Issa on her bike starting when they were really young, and it's always been really fun.
What about a restaurant?
Oh man, I mean, there's so many. I've always really loved August 1st, which is on the South End, like not a fancy place. But...
Breezed by that on a Segway on Wednesday.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, on turtle speed.
Nice. I mean, they have amazing bread, and it's also just a really cool vibe. Obviously, like I love Hen of the Woods. I'm trying to think. There's a lot of like, I love Taco Gordo. There's a lot of like really wonderful little places. You know what is
I've
like...
been to 0 of those, so clearly.
Oh, but you've been to Hotel Vermont with me, and that's
Yes.
Hen is there.
Same building?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's in the same building, yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, so there's like there's a hidden food gem in Burlington that everybody should know about. That's like super important to me. I like a New York slice, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so like some of the Vermont pizza.
I think you'd be like, everything up here is garbage.
I mean, I wouldn't, it's different.
Yeah.
Like the flatbread pizza here is like, it's different. And it's like, I don't not like it. It's just not quite the same. Having said that, there's like a little pizza place inside Arts Riot that like the signage is not good. People don't know it's there. It has got to be the best slice in Vermont. It is amazing. They have the crust is like just barely charred, and the toppings are incredible. And I think it's only open. It might only be open like Friday, Saturday nights. And it is totally worth stopping in and getting a slice. They're extraordinary. And the owners like serve you themselves, and they're like so sweet. And it's awesome.
Nice.
Yeah.
Got any wild cards for us?
I mean, so like the initial thing was like, okay, as a non-Vermonter, what are things that I love about Vermont that like a local might not know or appreciate?
Yeah.
And so I do have a couple of those that are wild cards.
Okay.
Weather appropriate footwear, like the normalization of weather appropriate footwear.
Oh, yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Like in New York, I mean, it's a little different. Like in the post-pandemic New York is different.
Yeah.
But like when I lived there was just like always a lot of pressure to like look perfect at the office, you know? And so like I was going in like in the middle of the winter in my kitten heels. I'd be like coming through the slush, and I was always like New Yorkers need to like understand weather appropriate footwear. Vermonters, they understand the assignment, they get the memo.
Yep.
Like I've never felt that way. The flip side is that I don't get to wear my cute shoes as much.
Yeah, even in the State House or the business districts, it's like a mullet. It's business from the ankle up and party from the ankle down.
Yeah, sometimes I wish that the State House was maybe exempt from the weather appropriate footwear.
I do too.
Yeah. We'll get to the State House style segment sometime soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's like, and I think another thing, this is like a direct shout out, but I don't know if Vermonters fully appreciate Front Porch Forum and how extraordinary it is. I know that it's not the same in every community, but in our neighborhood, it is like crucial to like our way of life. Although I will say, Steve and I always think it should be called the Lost Cat Network.
Yeah.
Because every single issue has a lost cat. Yeah. Yeah. We don't have cats, so we do wonder like what's going on, and I can't really explain why the cats are always missing, but I'm glad we know from Front Porch Forum they're usually found, so we're glad about that.
Yes. Yeah, it's always nice to have that happy ending of thank you. We found mittens.
Yeah.
All right. I am told that you are going to. I gave you the questions in advance just for the record here.
Well, you gave me the prompt.
I did.
You gave me the
Yes. You have chosen to ambush me here on Last Licks today.
You could have asked for a hint.
Could I? I didn't want a hint.
Okay, then you can't blame me. You didn't want a hint.
I was afraid of a hint.
Okay.
Well, let's hear it, Grossman.
Okay. So, as we've already discussed, like a large purpose of this podcast is like post-campaign therapy and dealing with, Andy's resentment towards me for, putting her through the paces.
Like Festivus. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So you live on an island in the middle of Lake Champlain. And so I have a few questions for you about Lake Champlain. I just want to see what your knowledge is
Oh,
about
no.
Lake
Okay.
Champlain.
This is a pop quiz.
This is a pop quiz.
My driver's ed teacher used to do this. Okay.
Wow, that's mean.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was mean.
Okay. Maybe I missed my calling to be a driver's ed teacher.
Yeah. It takes a certain personality.
Okay. So the first question, these are multiple choice. Not all of them.
Oh, good.
But just,
Thank goodness.
Yeah. You're
That was
welcome.
not a long form essay.
No, it is not.
Okay.
That's the rest of the podcast.
That's when I ask you a multiple choice question, I get a long form essay answer usually.
Yeah. That's true.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. It's a podcast.
I'm
It's not
stalling.
really-
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Ask your question.
Okay. So this question is, what is the biggest fish in Lake Champlain? And the options are A, a dolphin, B, a tuna, C, a lake sturgeon, and D, champ.
I'm pretty sure I came face to face with a lake sturgeon once when I was swimming, and it was really scary. It was like a underwater dinosaur. So I'm
Yeah.
going to go with C on this one.
That's correct. It's
All
a lake
right.
sturgeon. They are big.
They are very big.
Yeah.
Yeah, it freaked me out.
Okay. This
Okay,
is
I'm liking this so far.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yay. Okay. The next question, this is a yes or no. Can one navigate from the Atlantic Ocean through the St. Lawrence Seaway, through Lake Champlain, and out New York Harbor back to the ocean? Yes or no?
Yes, and I believe you can get to Chicago and the Great Lakes too.
The answer is yes. I didn't know that other thing.
Oh, okay.
That's cool. Okay. Good job.
I'm adding to the answer.
You are.
Like a
See?
smarty pants.
Long form essay.
Like
Isn't
an
it?
insufferable smarty pants with a podcast.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think that's both of us, for sure. Okay. How many vehicles, this is multiple choice again.
Great.
How many vehicles have fallen into Lake Champlain in the past 20 years? 3, 7, or 20?
20.
It's 7.
Is it only 7?
I could only find evidence of 7.
I feel like my neighborhood has lost at least 7 through the ice.
Steve was also really surprised.
Yeah.
He thought it was like 7 every year. And I mean, but that's what I could find.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'll accept that
Excellent.
for now. Then I'll go home and do research
And challenge.
and challenge. We'll have an update on the next podcast.
Okay. How many ferry lines are there crossing Lake Champlain? 2, 3, or 5?
5.
I have 3.
I thought it was 4, actually. So, okay.
3. The Grand
Okay.
Isle, Plattsburgh, Charlotte, Essex, and Ticonderoga, Shoreham.
So that's 4.
That's 3.
Say it again.
Grand Isle to Plattsburgh,
Yep.
Charlotte to Essex,
Okay.
and Ticonderoga to Shoreham.
Okay. They don't do Burlington to Port Ken anymore, huh?
Wow. I don't know.
I think that one's been defunct for a while.
Yeah, I think it has
Yeah.
too.
Okay.
That's a good point, though, that
Yeah.
it was, we've ridden that ferry. So.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
we
don't ride
always
the
take
ferry
the
very much.
we've taken the ferry before. One time when Issa was little and we were driving back from the city, they were really small and they were in the back seat. And Steve and I were talking, are we going to take the bridge or are we going to take the ferry? And we're
Yeah.
like, we're having this like back and forth for like 10 minutes. And finally Issa says, there's a ferry? Like she thought it was like a real little, like wood ferry kind of thing. And we were like, oh, we have some bad news for you. Like
Yeah.
Issa hadn't thought all this. She was like, oh my God, ferries are real, and they weren't. So
I think the boat is just as cool, though.
I think the boat is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Although I can see
Yeah.
it from their perspective. Okay, next question. Multiple choice. How many gallons of water are in Lake Champlain? 1 trillion, 6.8 trillion, or 20 trillion? You
How am I supposed to know this?
just have to guess.
I only know it in liters, so I'm
Oh,
gonna.
sure.
Yeah, I'll say 6.8 trillion.
Correct.
Okay. I should not have said I didn't know because then I could have claimed that I knew.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I knew that.
No, of course you did.
I control the editing so we can make this come out any way we want.
That's true. Okay, last question. Have you seen Champ?
Not that I can verify. When you're a kid, every wave looks like Champ. Every wave and log looks like Champ.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What is that face?
No, I was just hoping to hear more about one of your best Champ sightings.
My bet. I mean, I've seen him at the Lake Monsters game. That's but like the actual Lake Monster Champ.
Like, was there a time when you were a kid and you were like, no, that was Champ. That was Champ.
Yeah. Well, as a kid, you're like, you go out swimming and they're like, oh, there's a giant monster in the lake, and you're like, oh, you think about that.
That's awesome.
It crosses your mind.
Yeah. No, I like that.
Yeah.
All right. So, yes, you have seen Champ.
Sure.
Yeah, that was the right answer.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, good job.
Thanks. I did all right.
You did a good job.
Okay.
Well, that brings us to the end of this episode.
Thank you all for listening.
Follow us between episodes for the latest updates on our socials at There's No A in Creamy on Instagram, Substack, and Blue Sky.
And catch us on our next episode of There's No A in Creamy, Vermont Politics, Culture, and Beyond in Apple Podcasts and Spotify.